The easy part is out of the way for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now it's time to get down to business with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And it's going to be a long, strenuous offseason, and it may not even get done in that offseason between the Blue Jays and the two sides. So we'll break down what's expected to happen between Vladdy and the front office and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in, everybody, to Jay's Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And before we get into the video, we want to let you know that it is brought to you by Rentals.ca, who are proud supporters of Team Canada. And while they've been supporting our national team defend their home court in international competition, they've also been helping thousands of Canadians find their home floors all across the country, whether you are in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Halifax, Winnipeg, Mississauga, Edmonton, Victoria, St. John's. It doesn't matter. Rentals.ca has you covered.
Yeah, from coast to coast, they have a ton of options to find the perfect place and price for you. The website is clean, super easy to use, and you pinpoint exactly on the map where you want to move, finding all the available options in your area. So check out the website in the pinned comment as well as the description down below and find your home court with rentals.ca. And shout out to them as well for sponsoring us and supporting you guys and supporting Team Canada as well. So make sure to check them out. But Peter, there's a lot to go over today. Obviously, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., his situation has been a big talking point, and the Jays finally made a big move. They obviously acquired Jeff Hoffman, but a new report has dropped surrounding Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and it is an interesting one. We know they made an offer about $340 million for him, and now they have doubled up, according to Hector Gomez, and this report dropped a couple days ago. The Blue Jays plan to make a second contract extension offer to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which will be very close to what he is looking for, and this is pretty big. It got a lot of traction, obviously, on Twitter. Hector Gomez is pretty reliable when it comes to this stuff in particular. And this is very good news if you're the Toronto Blue Jays. They're starting to get on the Jays, the fan base aside a little bit with the Jeff Hoffman signing. They still have a ton of work to do, of course. But now they plan to make another contract extension offer that is going to be approaching, we assume, the $400 to $450 million range. But Peter, it's pretty big news here. He's set to get a second contract offer from the Jays per report. And you got to be pretty excited if you're the Toronto Blue Jays because they need to get this done. And it seems like all signs are pointing to him getting the extension.
Yeah, well, they need to offer him another contract, and I think, like I said in the intro, Nick, the easy part is out of the way. I mean, who is really worried about them going to arbitration after this back and forth that has lasted for 3 or 4 years about a potential multi-year extension? So they've had their opportunities in the past. They messed it up, or either Vladdy wasn't willing to go down on his value. Like, we don't know the full story, so it's hard to put blame on one side, but I just use the other teams and other star young players as the barometers here. And Julio Rodriguez didn't take him long to sign that multi-year extension. Corbin Carroll of the Arizona Diamondbacks, same thing. Like, we're seeing a lot of young guys. Fernando Tatis as well didn't have too much major league experience before he signed that long-term extension with the San Diego Padres. So if you know you have a very talented player in-house, and the Blue Jays knew that with Vladdy. Now, granted, there were some up and down seasons, and maybe you didn't see the full potential of him throughout his first full few years in the big leagues, but you knew about the talent and you knew what you had coming up into the system. He's been in your system for what, 10 years now,
Yep.
since he was 16 years old. So you know what you have in this player, which is why I didn't really understand the hesitation to strike a big deal when the opportunity was there. The Blue Jays missed out on that boat. Now they got to make it right before he hits free agency, and he's basically free game for all the other teams out there. So, again, avoiding arbitration, not that big of a story for me. The bigger story is that, yes, they are going to offer him a contract before spring training, because once spring training hits, no more negotiations. That's what Vladdy said. So we're going to take his word for it there. So you better strike a deal before pitchers and catchers are reporting to spring training, or even hitters for that matter, because that's your deadline right there.
Yeah, it seems like he wants, like we've been discussing on the channel, at least $450 million in his next contract. We all know he's going to be a free agent. Blair and Barker, Jeff Blair in particular, had an interesting um, I guess, take about it. He said Vladdy and the Jays agree on his value again. For all the angst, these sides have only gone to a hearing once. Unless the Jays simply don't want him around after 2025, this really isn't a difficult multi-year deal to put together. It never has been. Don't know if I agree with that as much because he's off. He's asking for 450 million. So I think if it wasn't difficult, they would have had it done. The difficult part to come in is when Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani over the past two off seasons have gotten generational amounts of money. And now, I mean, if this was a $300 million deal, they already offered him 340. So it gets very interesting. And John Morosi came out and kind of discussed whether the Jays give themselves a better chance at getting Vladdy long term after avoiding arbitration. I do think that is the case. I do think it's a good sign that they're communicating well. That paired with the Hector Gomez signing, saying they're making a second contract offer to him. I mean, all signs are pointing to him being extended. The question mark is when. They have a month, a bit less than a month now to do it. They still have other holes on their roster to fill. Anthony Santander is still available. It's, what is it, January 12th? So it's like, at this point, they need to get him locked down.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the first time we've heard from Hector Gomez that they made a second offer, which would be very close to what he's looking for. I expect a deal to get done. It's actually a pretty big report here. Again, Hector Gomez has been pretty on the ball with this stuff, so I'm happy. And of course, avoiding arbitration as well. They had to. If you went to arbitration with him over a few million, you were never going to agree to a contract between when there's a $50 million difference, at least in my opinion. So I'm happy
I
they got
don't
that
know
done.
about that. I don't know about that, but I want to know your thoughts about this, Nick. What I'm about to say right now. There is no limit to how much I'm willing to pay Vladdy in free agency. Now, I know over the years since we've started this channel that we have flip-flopped back and forth on our opinions of him. We called him out for being lazy a couple of years ago. We called him out for not reaching his full potential and not working hard. But at this point, the way that the Blue Jays have performed in free agency, their uh, their inability, I should say, to attract star players to Toronto. How could you just let one walk out the door? Now, is he on the level of Ohtani and Soto? No, he's not, which is why he's not going to get 700 or $800 million, which could that's a moot point. We're not going to go there, but to me, there's no limit to what Vladdy should get or could get from the Blue Jays because there's just no way that you could possibly lose him. The Blue Jays cannot afford to lose him considering their track record of getting star players in the last couple of years.
Yeah, if I tend to agree at this point. I mean, unless it's not going to be in the
Is there a
600.
limit though to you, Nick? Is there a limit?
the I'm like 500 million maybe, but he doesn't even want that. I mean, I think the front office probably has a limit, but I think ultimately Vladdy wants to get a deal done. If it takes 450 million, do it. If it takes 500 million, do it. I mean, they don't really have a choice and they're clearly going for it. I mean, they just signed Jeff Hoffman. Their bullpen is now set up very well for next season, and it went from one of the worst bullpens, well, statistically the worst bullpen in baseball, to now slightly better. They still need a lefty unless you have high hopes in Brendan Little. Of course, Eric Swanson's going to bounce back, we like to think. Chad Green, Jimmy Garcia. Like, the bullpen looks pretty good. They got an elite closer at that. And when you look at the projected Z WAR, which is a fancier WAR, whatever, for the lineup here, Peter, I don't know if any of these particular things jump at you as being high or low. Gaza might be a little bit high. Bassett might be a little bit high for me, but I think Vladdy might put up more than 3.8 WAR. So the team is looking okay if they can add one more piece. And I could foresee a world where they add Anthony Santander and they also go out and get a guy like Yo Moncada for third base. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do here, especially given their team. But the bullpen, and this is, of course, prior to the Jeff Hoffman signing, but the team looks a whole lot better than it did, with, of course, Jimmy Garcia, Andres Jimenez, and the best reliever, one of the best relievers available besides Tanner Scott and Jeff Hoffman.
Yeah, but you still need a bat. You still need a bat, and I think that point remains clear. What I'm surprised about in all these numbers that you're showing, Nick, is Alejandro Kirk, a guy that is
Hi.
kind of not disappointed with the bat, but hasn't really lived up to the bar that he set in 2022 when he won the Silver Slugger Award as a catcher. I mean, we know about his framing ability, we know about his blocking ability back there, and just his overall ability to call a game. He's a great defensive catcher, which is why the Blue Jays feel comfortable with him as their everyday guy. Say what you want about his base running, but I think Kirk is a fine starting catcher in this league. It's not like you have a ton of catchers around the league that are lighting the world on fire offensively and hitting for a 300 average. Just not something that you see out of the position. So if Kirk can contribute with the bat, I mean, that'll be great. That'll be some added bonus for the Toronto Blue Jays. But a lot of projections that I see have him having a pretty good year, which I would welcome with open arms, especially with the offensive struggles that the Blue Jays are slated to have. But very happy with the bullpen addition of Jeff Hoffman, even though with some of the concerns with his shoulder. I saw your video yesterday, Nick, and or today rather, and there are genuine concerns there, but I think the team is a lot better today than it was before that transaction was made yesterday. Now, do they still need an offensive piece? Anthony Santander would not be the cherry on top, but would definitely help move them into a B or a B plus offseason, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Kirk is one of the better defensive catchers in baseball with framing and things like that. So that's probably, hopefully, over a full season without Danny Jansen in the mix, it'll be interesting. But let us know down below what your thoughts are on this, and of course, the report about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And again, thank you to Rentals.ca for sponsoring this one. Check them out down below. See you guys later.